and I will be able to send this recording out to all of you because I know this will be a lot of information for you to hear tonight, and you'll probably have some questions and wish that you could listen to it again. And so we're grateful for Melissa Lang, who is joining us tonight. And I want Melissa to introduce herself. We feel very fortunate that we've been able to form this partnership with Melissa. She came to us through another gentleman, Brady Murray, and he lives here in Utah, and he has children with Down syndrome. And so he really wanted to find an organization that represented individuals and people with disabilities. And he came across the Utah Parent Center and really appreciated the valuable information that we put out to the community, and thought that our work was quality and that he had a lot of faith and trust in us. And so he has offered this program to us, and we've worked with Melissa to curate the program or the information that you'll see tonight to be Utah specific. And so we think this is a fabulous resource and tool. You should have all received the handouts for these slides in your email. So if you don't have those, check your email or your spam folder, and you can go ahead and follow along to the slides, and there should be a place for you to take notes on those slides. If you have questions tonight, go ahead and put those questions in the chat, and we will make sure and work those into the conversation tonight. We'll pause throughout, and we will also have a question and answer period at the end. And if you have a specific situation that's very nuanced for your own family, it might be a little bit more challenging for Melissa to answer, and so she'll make sure to let you know that. And we'll try to have you get in touch with her or another financial planning person for your own specific situation. But if you have general questions or a scenario, I'm sure it would be helpful for other parents to hear that as well. I am going to go ahead and launch a poll. And this short poll, if you'll just take a second and answer it, we want to kind of gauge your knowledge before you have listened to this workshop. So let me just launch that right now. And this really helps us design these trainings for you. And we want to we really value your time and want to make them beneficial to you. So if you'll just take a minute and fill that poll out, and I'll turn the time over to Melissa. And again, Melissa, I'll be monitoring the chat and helping you with that, but I'll turn the time over to you and you can take it away.
Great. Well, thank you, Jenny. Thanks so much for inviting us in to do this today. And we have a couple people on our Zoom tonight that are with our firm. We have Mary McDermott, who is also with Special Abilities Network, and Katie Shane, also a Special Abilities Network. And thanks to Zoom, we're able to now communicate with people, all over the state of Utah, all over the Western United States, and really all across the country now, and able to reach many more families on these important topics. So we're excited to work with UPC, and thank you guys for allowing us the opportunity. Before we get going too much, I have to do a little housekeeping, and I have to read this disclosure to you because I'm required to, and then we can get into the good stuff. So securities investment advisory and financial planning services are offered through qualified registered representatives of M&L Investor Services. My supervisory office is 4600 South Ulster Street, and you can see the other information there. Special Abilities Network is not a subsidiary of or affiliate of M&L Investor Services or affiliated companies. So we got that out of the way. Okay. So as I mentioned, Special Abilities Network, we're a group of professionals, chartered special needs consultants, which I'll get into in just a moment, that help families just like yours work to plan the future for them and their special needs child. Brady Murray, who Jenny mentioned, is a founder, as well as Mary McDermott. And Brady is, some of you may know him actually, he heads up a big nonprofit in Salt Lake area called RODS, Running for Orphans with Down Syndrome. And he helps families adopt foreign orphans that have Down syndrome into loving homes. And so him and his wife have created a very successful nonprofit in that area. And he is, and Special Abilities Network is actually based in Lehigh, although we do work with families all across the country, as I mentioned. So that's me. That's my mug on the screen there. I have been financial advisor. I think I'm in my 28th year, and I'm what's called a chartered special needs consultant. What's probably most important, the two things on this slide, is that I am a CHSNC and that I'm a mom of 3 kids, ages 21 to 30 now. 2 of my 3 are adopted, coincidentally enough, one from Russia and one from Ukraine. And my daughter, who's the youngest, 21, from Ukraine, we adopted her when she was 14 months old or so, and she has disabilities. We found out over time that she has fetal alcohol syndrome, which, for those of you that may not be familiar with that, that is a permanent neurological brain damage that happens. And folks that have that, it's a spectrum disorder, but there's a core effect that happens in a lot of their skills. And so I like to say I spend my time both personally and professionally in this area. So I mentioned CHSNC. What is a chartered special needs consultant? So CHSNC is a designation that's available in our financial services industry, and the curriculum and the courses provide designees education strategies in areas of planning for unique circumstances of having a special needs child. And you can see some of the topics of the curriculum that are included there, all about Medicaid complexities, able accounts, special needs trust, public benefits, tax deductions. It's a whole real discipline of work within our field. And so several years ago, the American College actually came out with a designation and curriculum. So those of us that carry this designation have gone the extra mile, in addition to our other certifications, to really be professionals in this body of work. So I like to say that planning, comprehensive planning for families that have kids with disabilities is really like a 3-legged stool. Comprehensive planning is. So there's the financial, legal, and disability areas. The legal area contains guardianship issues, powers of attorney, special needs trusts, all your estate planning. The financial arena, which is our expertise, has to do with all of the complexities in planning your future, not just for your child with disabilities, but for yourself as well. So are we going to get public benefits? What are those going to look like? How can we best pass our assets down to our children in trust? Do we need a trust? All of that body of work. And then the disability leg of that stool is all of the public benefits in detail, the letter of intent, which we'll touch on today, which is so very important, and just the human part of it, if you will, building your child's team. And I can say that if one of these legs isn't addressed, then it's likely your planning is falling short somewhere and could cost your child some important aspects in their life. So here's some of the questions that we typically see. What would happen if I was actually disabled? Well, the school will tell us what to do once they get out of high school, right? Should they stay in high school through age 21? Will they need to live with me forever? Can my child lose their benefits and services if they get them? Am I going to ever be able to retire? Can I just leave the money to the siblings and they can handle it? What if they can work? And the number one concern for most parents of children with disabilities is who will care for my child when I can't. It's not an if, it's a when, because we know that our kids may outlive us by 30 or 40 years. So we're to talk about tonight planning and a life care plan. And a life care plan is just a coordinated strategy stating family goals, individual goals, and a plan for achieving these for desired successful outcomes with an eye to planning for the individual with unique challenges. And the 4 planning questions are real basic. Where are we today? Where are we going? Where do we want to go? And how are we going to get there? Because where we are going and where we want to go may not be the same thing if we don't have a plan. Many families tell us things like, well, I haven't put a plan in place because I'm too busy dealing with everyday life. And I, like every one of you, can raise your hand and say, yes, I know what that's like. And we are very busy dealing with everyday life, but we still have to look towards the future. I have a trust, maybe I don't even know if it's funded. It's overwhelming. I don't know how or where to start, which happens a lot. And I can't afford it. And the biggest reason we hear is, well, my family is different. Well, we hear you on that because we are those same families. Mary and Brady both are parents of children with disabilities. And so all 3 of us live that life. So this is timelines compared, what a special needs planning family timeline looks like compared to a typical family planning timeline. So you can see that at birth, if we are a traditional family, we have a child, our child goes to school, they go through transition. By the time they're 18, we're now starting to look if they're going to college, and then they go throughout their life, and then we retire and we live our life out. And at the end of the time, if there's money left for our typical kids, great. But that's not what we have to look at. Our timeline goes a lot longer because we have a child, or adopt a child in my case. And then stage 1 might be determining the diagnosis, getting them early intervention service. At age 14, transition planning, and then when they're 18, applying for SSI and perhaps guardianship. Age 22, they're out of high school, they're into their service plan, and then when we retire at age 65 to 67 to 70, somewhere around there, and we pull our retirement, our child then can receive, and we'll talk a little bit about this, SSDI or childhood disability benefits for being a disabled adult child. And that stays with them all the way the rest of their life, as long as they're eligible. But it's not over when we pass away, because our child hopefully is going to outlive us for many years. So it's not over when we go. It's not over until they pass away. So some of the other considerations we have to take into account when we do planning for ourselves are, this is a traditional family financial planning pyramid. At the base of a pyramid, we are looking to protect our assets. We buy home insurance, car insurance, then we start saving a little money in emergency reserves. We get a will, maybe a trust in place. Then we start saving money for the long term, for perhaps retirement or college funding. And then we preserve our assets and make sure that they pass down to the next generation. But for families like ours, if you look at all these things over here on the right side, the life care planning, the pluses, those are all the additional planning things that families like ours have to pay attention to. Lifetime supplemental needs, guardianship, beneficiaries, letter of intent, transition plans, special needs trust, what is the residential need, government programs, proper gifting and inheritance management. So this is why planning for families like ours is very different from a typical family.
Melissa, we have one question right here that applies to the timeline on the previous page.
Okay.
C. Anderson said, doesn't a special needs child need to be able to work enough credits to get SSDI? Can you explain how the work credits also pertain with the parents?
Sure.
Social Security?
I'll touch on that because I think there's some slides later on that. But when we say SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance, the adult disabled child, if they are unable to work or they don't earn what's considered by Social Security SGA substantial gainful activity of 1,310 a month, that's an important number. If your adult child doesn't earn that amount, if they earn under that amount, they can qualify based on their parent's Social Security record at when the parent retires. And full retirement for most people right now is age 67 or thereabouts. So for example, if I'm retiring and my Social Security benefit, I'm making this number up, is $2,500 a month, and I'm 67 and I pull that retirement benefit, my disabled adult child, DAC, is entitled to, from my record, receive up an amount equivalent of about half of that. So in that example, about $1,250 a month for life, as long as they meet the criteria for that. So there's SSI and then there's SSDI, two different things which we'll touch on. So they're not getting that benefit on their own work credits, they're getting it on the parents' work credits. Okay.
Let's see, there's one more question on that. Diana says, my fully disabled son, whom requires full attention from me, his primary caregiver is now 16. I just recently became disabled due to negligent medical mistake. If me, his primary caregiver, can't work, I'm medically disabled. What can I do? I need help now that I'm disabled.
That's probably a big old topic that I'd love to address privately.
Okay.
That's a lot to unpack right now. So I'm happy to do that offline.
Okay. And then so SSDI would replace SSI once we retire.
Correct. Once you're receiving that. So that's important to know. Until you are actually receiving that, your child cannot receive it.
And is it choice between SSDI versus SSI then, one or the other?
Yeah, you don't get both. It's one or the other. And it just basically makes sense that if your Social Security retirement, about half of that is more than the SSI level, then it makes sense for them to move to the SSDI versus SSI.
Okay, and then one
but,
more.
You know, we have clients that work for their teachers, for instance, for years, and they're not paying the Social Security system. So their child will not get a benefit from that because their Social Security is really minimal. They're getting it from their public employee retirement plan. And so what you want to do is, if your Social Security, half of that is higher than SSI, then yes, you want to flip your child when you retire to that.
Okay, and then Andrew says, is that amount separate from the parents' benefits, or does it deplete the parents' benefits?
It's separate. It's in addition to, it's part of our system.
Okay, and then Diana, who has a disability now, said, I would appreciate it if you could speak with me privately. I'm a single mom. So Diana, we'll have Melissa's information posted at the end of the slide. And in fact, it's on your handout at the end of the slide, and you can reach out to Melissa privately. Okay.
Okay, we'll keep moving along here.
Yes.
So we like to say that planning is family-centered planning. It's not possible just to isolate the child with disabilities needs over here and just focus only on that. Because as you can see on the slide, we have maybe kids with disabilities, kids, typical kids without disabilities, and parents, and we all have competing needs on the same resources. And in the intersection there is the family. So we do long-term planning for the family with an eye to the individual with disabilities. This is an interesting statistic, I think. 2 out of 3 American adults don't have a will. Our families are very different for all the reasons we just talked about and those that you know personally. So our children really depend on us to plan. And regardless of your family situation, there is something that everyone can do to take a step forward. And so I really want to try to leave that with you tonight. This is a lot of information we're going to go over. Some of it may be overwhelming to you. We don't expect you to remember all this, but I want to leave you with, there are things that everybody can do. So this is our comprehensive life care planning process, and we are going to touch on all of these things, spend more time on some of them than others. So it's really a 9-step process. It doesn't always happen in this order, but step 1 is always to address primary issues, assess any planning that may have already been done, or perhaps no planning has been done, and that happens a lot. People get stuck because they don't know who's going to be the guardian of their kids. No one can do it as well as them. So we start where we're at. Then step 2 is we think about a family mission statement, and we'll talk about that. Step 3 is super important, letter of intent. Step 4, let's identify the financial resources. Step 5, let's determine what the life care plan costs are. Step 6 is building our legal foundation. 7 is actually putting our strategies into play or implementing them. Step 8 is having a family, sending a family letter or having a meeting to let others know what we've done in our planning so that they don't mess it up inadvertently. And then step 9 is annual review. And this stuff is not one and done. So we like to meet with our families at least once a year to make sure that they're on track. And things change all the time, which we'll talk about. So let's talk about addressing our primary issues. Some of the things we hear from folks are, you know, I'm just not sure. My child may need some assistance, but I'm not sure yet. And I can tell you as a parent of a 21-year-old now, it doesn't become apparent all at once that your child, what kind of help your child is going to need, and they evolve over time. But that doesn't mean that you should wait and say, well, when I figure out what they need, I'll do it, because your planning can really adjust to that. I have a life insurance policy that I bought, but I don't know how to integrate it with my planning, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I don't trust anybody to do as good of a job with my child if I'm not here. And I'll just say that that's a given. It's very unlikely that we're going to find somebody that knows our child as well as us, that knows all their history, that knows their pros and cons and how to deal with them. But yet, don't let that stop you. Okay, admit it, and let's find a solve for that. How can we afford to do anything? And again, I'm going to show you some things. You can afford to do some things. Okay, so let's talk about the family mission statement. So this really outlines your family's values and principles, and how you teach those to your children. And what do caregivers need to know about your children's expectations? Why is this important? Well, if you are going to be managing my daughter, if I'm not around, you need to know that she expects understanding, patience, and repetition, even after the 100th time that you may tell her something, because she can't remember it. So those key things should be at the core of your planning. So here's an example. Our family strives to treat everyone with respect, value others, have compassion, and help one another reach their potential. And that's kind of the charter for your plan, if you will. Step 3, putting your letter of intent together. And I said this is super important. This is the parental substitution guide. What you know, what you desire, your goals for your quality of life for your child. So my child might outlive me by 40 years. So what is the plan? Where is she going to live? Can she live independently? Does she need roommates? Is it a group home? What is that? What are the things I don't want? Employment. She wants to make a contribution. Is she capable? Is she capable of full-time employment with benefits, or part-time without benefits? How do I plan that? What are the social and recreational needs? Because everybody deserves a quality of life. Others have to know, others have to know her medical history. She could not recite that on her own. And it's thick. Environment management, safety and community. She needs to be somewhere safe because she's vulnerable. Who are the trustees to manage the taxes and the money? Do they understand public benefits? Who are the advocates and the guardians? Who will look after, fight for, and be a friend to my child? And this is all in that letter of intent. What does your child's team need to know if they can't access you? So you think about it now. If you're lucky enough, you go out to dinner or something, and you have somebody watching your child and the laundry list that you have to leave behind just for being gone for a few hours. Now think that you go on a trip to an island and you don't come back. You say, that's it, I'm staying on the island. And what is somebody going to need to know? Because it's all up here for us, and it has got to come out on paper, because if you sit and think about everything you know about your child and their history, it's a lot. So who are the relatives, and are they helpful? If you have a nonverbal child who can't tell the caregivers that, Aunt Susie just isn't their favorite for good reason, how is anybody supposed to know that? This stuff has to be written down. Who is on their teams? How does somebody contact them? What's your philosophy about medical care? How would you like hygiene, relationships, and table manners managed? How do you praise and set realistic expectations? How do you want their money handled? Does your child know what to do in an emergency if they suddenly feel ill, get lost, or there's a fire? How will anybody know if your child is satisfied and happy? Because we all know when our kids aren't. How is someone else going to know that? So here's 10 basics. Okay, letters of intent. Letter is kind of a misnomer, I think. It's really a document. And there are many different forms I've seen out there. We have a template that we use with the families that we work with. But they have to have at least these 10 basic things. The family histories, where and when you were born, raised, married, something special about siblings, grandparents, description of your child's birth, when, where, your feelings, a general overview of your child's life to date and your feelings about the future, education, and this, as you know, could be a very thick section in there, IEPs, name of programs, etc. Employment, types of work your child might enjoy if they're not of age yet. What is your wish for them? Do they need to be in, it's kind of a dirty word now, a shelter workshop type of environment, or do they want to be out in the community? What is of interest to them? Residential environment. Would you want them to live with relatives or friends or other, or the people that you don't want them to be around? What is their social environment going to be like? What type of activities do they enjoy? Sports, dances, movies? Should they have spending money? Do they know how to use it? Religious environment, if that's important to you. Where is their local place of worship? Are there clergy that may be familiar with them? Medical care. Who are their current doctors, therapists, clinics, hospitals? How frequently your child attends and for what purpose? Current medications, how are they given? For what purpose? Describe them. And what has worked and what hasn't in the past. Behavior management, describe their current behaviors and the management that's being used to help with those. And perhaps some that have not worked so they don't get repeated again. And then final arrangements, and this may sound a little morbid, but think about it. When we are gone, our child will outlive us and they someday will pass away. What is it that you want for them? Perhaps you have religious views on that. Perhaps you have whatever views you do or don't want to happen, and that should be in there. And then you should sign and date that letter. So it's not legally binding. However, it's tremendously helpful to caregivers while you're here, and helpful when you're not for successor guardians. It creates the basis for forming your child's team. It prevents chaos in your child's life when they're already confused and scared. And it paves the transition for those that will follow you in helping your child continue with desired outcomes and goals. So it really should encompass the plan for your child's future. It's the heart and soul of your planning for your child. one template available to you is Utah's, trying to move this around here, care notebook. And it's available to you on the Utah Medical Home Portal. You can see that website up there, medicalhomeportal.org. You can find it there and search for Utah. Once you're on Utah's page, you can type in care notebook, and there's downloadable templates that will be listed. And Jenny from UPC mentioned this was a good part that you can use in constructing your letter of intent. So what are the things that we need to think of for our child? Independence, financial well-being, quality of life, employment, education, housing needs. What are the possibilities? So one thing these all have in common is they require resources, whether that's human capital or financial capital. So step 4 is identifying our financial resources, whether that's coming from us as parents, perhaps other family members, grandparents, government benefit programs, or gifts from others. So this slide shows you the difference between public sources of funding and private sources of funding. Public sources of funding, the big systems are Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare, and that pays for basics. Basic personal needs, medical care, room and board to some extent, which we'll talk about, care and supervision and employment activities. Private sources of funding is going to take care of everything else, and that might be an ABLE account, your supplemental needs trust, family support. I like to call that the quality of life fund, really, because that's what it is. Sometimes when you hear trust, that can get kind of scary. It's just where the dollars are for their quality of life. And that can be used for specialty medical dental care that might be excluded from public benefits, gifts on special occasions, professional fees, vacations, computers, phone, basic care if social benefits are cut back, personal hygiene, and clothes. So it's really all of the quality of life items.
And we have 2 questions that relate to the SSI and Social Security, so I thought this would be a good time to address those. Okay. One question was, what if there's a big difference in each parent's Social Security? And another one that goes along the same lines. Lorraine says, I'm planning on taking Social Security before my husband, but will have a lesser amount than him. Will that reduce the SSDI amount my disabled son will get? Is it wiser to wait so he will get a greater amount from my husband? So some questions there about a 2-parent household and trying to decipher that.
Okay, so the first question was, what if there's a big disparity and one parent has paid more into the system or been the higher earner than the other one? So you want to choose the higher number. So let's say that, just making this up, wife has less of a benefit than husband does, but wife is maybe older and gets to age 67 before. Well, if it's more than SSI, just go ahead and get on the disabled adult child benefit from wife's benefit. And then when husband reaches 67 and his benefit is higher, flip to that one. You can do that. The rule is you can only have one. And then the other question was, remind me, Jenny, sorry.
She says, will that let's see, I'm planning on taking Social Security before my husband, but will have a lesser amount than him. Will that reduce the SSDI amount my disabled son will get? Is it wiser to wait so he will get a greater amount from my husband? But I think you answered that. He can go on hers and then switch.
Yes, but let me also say that it's important, the amount that your child will get is most of the time it doesn't make sense for people to pull Social Security retirement at 62, which is the soonest you could. That's not a full benefit. Full benefit these days for people retiring is somewhere between 66 and 3 months to age 67. So it's the number if you take your Social Security at 62 and you never flip it over to a spouse's, then your child is getting that reduced benefit. In that case, I think it would be beneficial to wait until your full retirement age, because there is quite a difference there and the number will be a lot higher for your child. Likewise, if you put off pulling your Social Security until you're age 70, because it goes up like 8% per year if you wait from 66 or 67 to age 70, your child isn't going to get a higher amount. It's always based on that full retirement age amount. That's what they're going to get, that approximate half, equivalent half of.
Okay. And then one more, let's see, and this might be an individual question. I was told that when my daughter turns 18, are some programs that my daughter can buy her home. That way she will use the home to rent the rooms to kids with disabilities.
That's a more involved one that I have to ask more questions to get details on, but I'm happy to do that independently.
So Marco, at the end of the slides that I emailed to you today, Melissa's number is listed in her email, and you can reach out to Melissa for a personal question like that. Okay, we'll move forward.
Okay, so the big three: Medicaid, SSI, Social Security, which is different than SSI, and Medicaid waivers. This is live for our kids when they become adults. Well, we're in their children, but especially when they become adults. So what public programs offer help in paying for health care services?
Let's see, Melissa, you're frozen a little bit. Wait, okay, are you back?
I'm here.
Okay, good.
Did I cut out?
Good, okay.
Okay, okay, I'll keep going. When financial eligibility criteria is met, Medicaid covers families with children, pregnant women, elderly, and people with disabilities. People who are not U.S. citizens can only get Medicaid to pay for a life-threatening medical emergency. So in Utah, the state-specific definition of intellectual disability is a disorder in which a person's overall intellectual functioning is well below average and intelligence quotient of 70 or less. Individuals with intellectual disabilities have a significantly impaired ability to cope with common life demands and lack some daily living skills expected of people in their age group and culture. So to be eligible for services, the person's disability must result in a substantial functional limitation in 3 or more of the following areas of major life activity: self-care, receptive and expressive language, learning, mobility, self-direction, capacity to live independently, and capacity to become economically self-sufficient. Utah Division of Services for People with Disabilities, or DSPD. It serves children and adults who have intellectual disabilities, physical disabilities, brain injuries, and autism. And DSPD is part of the Utah Department of Human Services. Now, the wait list is extensive. And so while we're talking about some of these great resources, you can expect to wait at least 5 years for services. And I work with people in lots of different states. Some have it worse, some have it a lot better. But 5 years is a pretty long time to be waiting for services.
And if I can do one more update on that, Melissa, we're hearing that the legislature is funding a number of people to come off of the wait list this year, around 400 people potentially. And so like I know my son's been on the wait list for 7 years. So it's one of these things where you're wanting to get on, but also to update your situation with your caseworker. So each year as the legislature possibly funds more people, your file is up to date, so you could potentially qualify. So work with your DSPD caseworker. And if you are unfamiliar with DSPD and want more information on that, please contact the Utah Parent Center and we can fill you in personally on your specific situation with that. And then Christine Humphrey asked, do you know what states have a shorter wait list?
Well, I am not an expert on every state. This is anecdotal, but I'll just tell you that I'm working with people. California, Colorado, for certain services, that is. I'm coming to you live from Denver. So we have 2 adult waivers, SLS, supported living services, and there is no wait list for that. The biggie DD waiver, developmental disability, that includes more. There's a wait list on that one. So I've also heard that Massachusetts is a state that is very generous with their benefits, but I would not consider myself an expert on all the states out there. It's hard enough to keep up with one or two, let alone 50 plus. So, okay, so you've had this slide up here for a while, but DSPD, Division of Services for People with Disabilities, offers community support waiver for individuals with IDD or other related conditions, physical disabilities waiver, acquired brain injury, and the new choices waiver when somebody's moving out of a facility into the community. And then the Department of Health deals with medically complex children's waiver, involves 3 or more specialists, 3 or more organ systems, and level of skilled nursing. And then technology dependent waiver, generally trach or trach vent and level of skilled nursing. And then the aging elderly waiver, 65 and older. So the community supports waiver is for individuals with IDD or other related conditions in Utah. And what supports does that waiver offer? And I'll let you take a look at that, but behavior supports, chore services, companion services, environmental adaptations, financial management, supported living, supported employment, residential habilitation supports, professional parent supports. So there's a lot in there. And now what you can qualify is based on need and proving that need as well. So I'm going to give you a super crash course in Medicaid. Think of Medicaid like a house. There's many ways to get in, and each different point of entry, it entitles the individual to healthcare services. Medicaid is not Medicare, 2 distinct different programs, and we're focusing on Medicaid in our talk today. So Medicaid is different than SSI. There's 2 key eligibility qualifiers. First is the financial. An individual can have no more than $2,000 in their name. That means bank accounts, retirement accounts, UTMA accounts. The exception would be an ABLE account. And they must meet the Social Security Medicaid definition of disability. You still have a right to own a car and a house, but you really need to think each individual situation if that's a wise thing to do. UTMA accounts I mentioned, that's a kind of the precursor to a college 529 account, uniform trust to minors account, uniform gift to minors account in some states. And that money, if you have a child that has that money in there, maybe a grandparent gave it to them that way, and now you know they're not going to college, that money is a countable resource. And so there's ways to spend that down or get that out of their name. To qualify for state waivers in Utah, there's different criteria in addition to what I just mentioned, but always at a bare minimum, you can't have 2,000 in your name, and you have to meet that definition. Utah Medicaid uses the same deeming qualifications as the federal SSI does. So in Utah, if you qualify for SSI first, it expedites your Medicaid application process. Again, Medicaid and SSI are 2 different programs. Medicaid is the health benefit and long-term services resources with the waivers, and SSI is a funding option for those impacted by disabilities. It's the cash portion of the benefits. Okay, so let's talk about what type of costs are involved in funding our kids. Whether that's their current expenses, expenses after 18 and 22 in lifetime, and after the lifetime of parents. So you have to think about everybody's individual, but each child, if they're able, it's a good idea to have them be part of the person-centered planning rather than just sit there and dictate. My daughter, she's verbal and she can tell you some things and talk about what she wants. Now, she doesn't really base that in reality, but she has ideas about what she wants, but it's a good idea to have them involved to help them determine what their life is going to look like. But what does the quality of life look like for them and your family, the culture of your family? Everybody's different. So you have to think about some of these things. Are they going to be in a day program? Typically that's covered by waiver benefits. Residency. Are they going to be in your home, or are they going to be in a residential setting that could be potentially covered by waiver benefits? Medical care, ongoing therapies, their quality of life, recreation, vacations, education, appropriate social connections, hobbies, outings, and community. So what is that all going to look like? And what is the biggest expense? It tends to be housing. And that tends to be a real hot button for our community right now. So this is priced out in the United States. Right now, SSI monthly is $841 a month. There's almost 5 million people with disabilities ages 18 to 64 in the US whose sole source of income is SSI. The average monthly rent for a basic one-bedroom apartment in Salt Lake metro area is $1,478. That's 176% of the monthly income of a disabled person in the US, leaving no money for food, transportation, clothing, other necessities. It's obviously not affordable, and it's no wonder where there's, over 400,000 people that are homeless, living on the streets or in shelters, and too many people stuck in institutions, ranging from $224 to $1,100 a day. So this is some interesting information. This is the US estimated number of individuals in our country with IDD by age of the family caregiver. So this is a little bit outdated. I couldn't find updated information on this, but there is over 5 million people living with IDD, living with family caregivers. 16% of those are either living alone or with a roommate. 13% are in a supervised residential setting, and 71%, no surprise, are living with a family caregiver. But you can see what happens here. The family caregiver over age 60. So this is well over 1 million now. There's 1 million people living with family caregivers that are over 60. So as we like to say, what could possibly go wrong there? If you're a 70-year-old individual caring for your 40-year-old intellectually disabled adult child, there's a lot that could go wrong there, but this is what our makeup looks like. There's a lot of financial pressures on our social benefits. Baby boomers are retiring in need of long-term care. So when people run out of their own money, or they don't have long-term care insurance and they have a long-term care event, what picks that up? In our country, it's Medicaid. Medicare does not pay for long-term care. Private health insurance does not. Only long-term care insurance for Medicaid, private assets are going to pay for that. So when people are in nursing homes on Medicaid, that's that same pool of money that's delivering the benefits to our kids. So we've got this pig in the python of more and more people accessing that money. We have fewer workers paying into our Social Security system to support an increasing number of recipients. And I always used to ask people when we used to do our workshops in person and live to raise their hand if they think that we're going to have the likelihood that we'll have the current level of funding in the future. And unfortunately, nobody raised their hand, and they were right. There are a lot of pressures on our systems, and I think that they will eventually need to be cut and will be cut. So most Medicaid enrollees are children, but most Medicaid spending is for the elderly and people with disabilities. So if you look at this, there's 68 million cases or enrollees in Medicaid. 48% were children. 21% of the budget is allocated to children, 27% adults, 15% of the budget, elderly, 9% of the cases, 21% of the budget. This is us, the disabled population, 15% of the number of cases, but 42% of the budget. So when folks are looking to, for what they call it in the government, revenue opportunities, this is what's considered a revenue opportunity, decreasing benefits, okay? So in uncertain times, we really have to look at funding strategies, not just relying on public benefits, but our own private assets, insurance, and then natural supports. It has to be a blend of all these things. And what are the goals for our entire family? Because as I mentioned, you can't just say we're going to plan for our kid over here because everything intersects. What about our own retirement? So a generally accepted withdrawal rate by financial professionals is about 3 to 4% a year of your savings in order to have your assets last as long as possible. So when those assets are invested in things like equity assets, mutual funds, stock-oriented growth mutual funds, and earning 6 to 7% a year, you can use about 3 to 4% of that to make your assets last as long as possible. So 3% of $2 million is $60,000 a year or $5,000 monthly. This does not include somebody receiving Social Security. So everybody can take a deep breath because that'll cut that about in half. But nevertheless, it's expensive if you live a long time. If we're putting kids through college in Utah, the Utah State University, $21,000 per year average cost for a Utah resident living on campus. Undergrad total is over $84,000 for an undergrad degree now. And what if we need long-term care? Skilled nursing has now, the national average has topped $100,000 a year, believe it or not. And what if we ourselves have to help care for aging parents? I'm in that situation. I have a 95-year-old mom that I help out. So what if the worst happens? What if we as parents die prematurely? What then is left for our child? How do we do this? How much is enough? So this is an example. Marty is 17. His parents are 54 and 53. They want him to have $4,000 a month to live on from his age 25 to the end of his life. And it'll take about $3 million from when Marty's dad passes away at his age 85 to support Marty from his age 48 to his age 85. And we did include Marty receiving about $1,300 a month from SSDI when his dad is 67 for the rest of his life. So this number right here seems insurmountable, doesn't it? Okay, do you know how far in the future that is? If he's 17 today, and it's going to be at his age 48. So what is that? That's 31 years into the future. So remember what gas costs. Well, maybe that's not a good example. Remember a gallon of milk cost, 30 years ago. Okay, so it's relative, all right? So this is not saying you need $3 million today. But what are the possible funding strategies? Okay, you could invest a lump sum today of $620,000. I don't know a lot of people that have an extra $620,000 they don't need for their own retirement or funding kids' educations. And you have to assume that's going to earn 6% per year, each and every year, net of taxes and net of fees. That's unrealistic. You can allocate your estate planning so that at the end, whatever assets you have left to go to your kids, go more towards your child with special needs, and of course go in a special needs trust for them. Because if you have 3 kids, and 2 of which can be self-sufficient, and everybody says, well, I'd like to leave it equally to my 3 kids, a third, a third, a third. Yes, but what if your one child cannot work, is not going to be self-sufficient? So you may want to consider allocating more of your estate to your child with special needs trust. You can utilize life insurance, and there are low-cost life insurance options out there today. This is probably one of the leading ways to fund a special needs trust for your child. You can think outside of the box. Some of the things that people do, spending money, it's always hard not to, it's a need or a want, but you'd be surprised if you save $20 each week for a year, you'd save $1,040 a year. What if you saved that money and bought life insurance with that, depending on your age, et cetera? Maybe that bought, I don't know, $100,000 of life insurance that could go into your child's trust. So there are things that you can be doing. Don't feel like you have to save that whole 3 million or whatever the number is. You can leverage monies that you're saving. So here's some example. This is a single parent who has limited income. She's 35 years old. Her daughter is 10-year-old Lindsay with disabilities that are going to require lifetime supports. She's stretching her budget, trying to manage on her own. What could she do? First of all, she could make sure that Lindsay qualifies for SSI and Medicaid when she turns 18. Make sure Lindsay never has more than $2,000 in her name. She could contact an estate planning attorney to draft a will with a contingent supplemental needs trust. So that's kind of some legal stuff in there that we haven't talked about. But you don't have to draft a trust today. It could simply be one that springs out of your will when you pass away, and it's a lot less expensive to do it that way. You could purchase life insurance through your employer that tends to be inexpensive. The beneficiary in that case should always be the will of the insured, because that's going to point that benefit to the beneficiary of the special needs trust. You could purchase either term life insurance or permanent insurance on her own life, and the beneficiary again should be the will of the insured. And make sure any retirement plans that she might have the proper beneficiary arrangement as the will of the account owner in this case. Another thing that could be done, and I mentioned to Jenny, is to use a pooled trust. And in Utah, we know there is a pooled trust. I'm not going to have time to get into the details of that tonight, but that's something that we could communicate with you later on. She could save or invest $50 a month into an ABLE account. And after 11 years, by the time Lindsay's 21, there'll be about $9,316 in there. And after 20 years, by the time Lindsay is 30, there's $23,102 in there. And if Sally invested double that amount or $100 a month into an ABLE account, by the time Lindsay's 21, there'd be about $18,632. And after 20 years, it'd be about $46,204. So those are some ideas. That doesn't mean that's right for any one of you. This is very individualized, and I'm not recommending anything specific, just giving some ideas here. She could also purchase permanent life insurance on her life that can provide a death benefit with the ability that death benefit goes up over time. Permanent insurance is designed to stay in force as long as the insured lives, which is, if you can do it, this is the preferred type of life insurance to have when you have a special needs child and a special needs trust, because with the term insurance, it's going to run out after a term of time. Permanent will last as long as you do. It has a cash value component that can grow over time, that can be used to fund current expenses, and it grows without taxation. So example, yes.
Before we go on to the 2-income household, just a couple of questions that have come up. And just to clarify, Sarah said, can't you list the name of the supplemental trust as the beneficiary? And I think that's what you meant by the will, right? Is either the will or the supplemental needs trust. The reason why you would want to not list your child is because if your child has SSI and Medicaid and you leave all of this money to them in their name, that's going to not make them eligible anymore for the SSI. So you want to make sure the beneficiary is the trust and not the child.
So the reason I said will of the insured there is because I was referencing having what's called a contingent supplemental needs trust. So when you have a will and you don't have a revocable living trust that is today, whether it's your own or a special needs trust, you just have a will that says when I die, assets go to this supplemental needs trust. That trust technically doesn't exist. It's a testamentary trust, which means that you have to list the will of the insured. I know this sounds like we're splitting hairs, but it is technical language. In my case, I have a trust in my name, revocable living trust. When I pass away, a share splits off to my daughter in a supplemental needs trust. So I have a trust, the Melissa trust. It's not just a will. So in my case, my life insurance does say the Melissa Lang revocable living trust, points it right into there. Okay. So if you have a trust already, that you want to be the beneficiary, then yes, it could be, it should be the beneficiary. Again, these are individualized things, and I don't want to give wholesale information without knowing your individual situation.
And then this is another question that will pertain to our next scenario here. The question was, our kids with disabilities are currently age 5 and 10. As you said, it's hard to know what needs they may have as adults. However, we'd love to have a goal to shoot for in terms of financial help, not just for planning and saving, but in determining what portion of our life insurance should go in the special needs trust should we die, because we have a total of 5 kids that life insurance needs to support. Any advice on estimating costs when future needs are unknown? And he said, to clarify, we'd love a goal to shoot for in terms of how much financial help our disabled kids will need as adults.
So that's a big question to unpack too. But so in the work that we do with families, that's what we try to do. And it's so individualized. I'm not trying to be vague or avoid it, but it is so individualized. I even hate to say this because it's such a broad brush statement, but out in future value, and I'm talking 30 years, 40 years from now, if somebody is going to need a couple $1,000s a month, I think a number to shoot from is anywhere from 750,000 to $1 million plus. And that is a very broad brush, okay? Because I have software that actually calculates that. And so I like to do the right job and figure that out. There are ways to figure that out. It's kind of involved. So when you have, I guess that's a conversation I could have offline too, to get detailed into your situation.
And it really depends on so many factors too, like
if
there's SSI, if you
yes.
have parent, like money coming from grandparents,
yes,
if you know it. So it's just really individualized, and also what kind of care you want to set up. You know what
totally.
lifestyle you are envisioning for your kids when you come up with that number.
So when I come up with those numbers, I look at all of the factors that we've been talking about: SSI, SSDI, parents, life insurance, retirement. What are the parents' goals? You just can't say it's this, because it has to come out of the total, and we have to figure out how to allocate that. So yes, Jenny, you're right. It is extremely individualized.
Okay. Our 2-person income.
Okay, so here we have facts. Bob and Susan are both 35. They have 3 kids. One of their kids, Shane, has disabilities, needs lifetime supports. He's also 10. Together they earn 150. What can they do? They can make sure, again, that he's eligible for SSI and Medicaid at 18. They can purchase some group term life insurance on both parents through their employers. They can have a will and revocable trust drafted, which is what I just referenced, with a supplemental needs trust for Shane. They can make sure that all beneficiary designations are coordinated with their estate plan and trust. They can contribute to an ABLE account, and they can purchase permanent survivorship or second to die life insurance, which is on both parents, that will pay to the trust upon the parent's second death. So what does that mean? It is a particular type of life insurance policy that we use frequently to fund trusts. It pays only after the second parent passes away. The special needs trust can be the beneficiary. It is permanent insurance, meaning it will be there forever. And typically it can be less costly than 2 separate individual permanent or whole life plans. Third example, a grand family or kinship. What can they do? Again, public benefits at 18, review their estate plan with an attorney to ensure their assets pass appropriately to the grandchild in the supplemental needs trust. They don't want to inadvertently leave the money behind. Perhaps the parents are still alive, and if they don't have a will, that money by intestacy law will go to the parents versus these grandkids. Consider a survivorship life insurance, paying into a trust, or contribute to a monthly ABLE account. Uses of life insurance, it has to be coordinated with your overall estate plan, and Any trusts, ownership, beneficiary designations are very important. Your attorney must always know the amount of life insurance you have. If you purchase some after you have your trust drafted, let the attorney know. Make sure you do the right ownership and beneficiary designation. An insurance audit might make some sense. I'm going to touch on the ABLE account right now, ABLE Act, which is the Achieving a Better Life Experience, signed into being in 2014. The purpose of ABLE is to provide new opportunities beyond what was available for individuals and families to save for the purpose of supporting individuals with disabilities and maintaining their health, independence, and quality of life. So it does have some limitations. There's pros and cons to it. It's neither bad nor good. It's an appropriate tool. A beneficiary can only have one ABLE account. They can't have multiple ABLE accounts. They can contribute, all sources have to be less, 16,000 or less per year coming into it, contributions. Distributions are for eligible expenses only. If an account reaches $100,000, the beneficiaries, this should only be SSI, is terminated, but their Medicaid services are not. Once the account goes back under 100,000, the SSI is restored. It does have a Medicaid payback provision. So if there is money left in the ABLE account and the beneficiary passes away after final expenses and bills are paid out, Medicaid has a claim to that. So instead of it going back to other family members, it goes to Medicaid to pay for services rendered. So an appropriate use for an ABLE account, it's primarily meant for people working that have disabilities who are receiving Medicaid services or waiver services. It provides an account to deposit excess earnings so they don't go above the $2,000 limit, provides some good autonomy and independence over that money. It can be used for rent. However, you should spend SSI rent on first rather than paying rent with ABLE money in order to avoid a negative impact on a reduction in SSI payments. It has tax advantages. And in summary, it may serve as a good place to put a beneficiary's own excess earnings or transfer UTMA dollars into, possibly pay rent, but it's really not meant as an estate planning tool. So considerations when using an ABLE account, it's good for third-party money. Okay, third-party money is our money. It's not the person with the disability. That's first-party money. Third-party is us or other people putting money into it. So it's why would you want to subject your third-party money to a Medicaid payback and distribution restrictions? Estate planning, supplemental needs trust have many advantages over ABLE accounts and a disadvantage. The interest or gains in an ABLE account grow without income taxation, but keep in mind what tax bracket is the individual going to be in, the beneficiary. So is that really a big advantage? Okay, building the legal foundation. So here we're going to talk about the special needs trust. Again, we've pounded this into your heads. I think by now you can't have more than $2,000 in cash or securities and have to meet Social Security's definition of disability. So hence the supplemental needs trust, commonly referred to as a special needs trust, came into being many years ago. And it's really important to know that when you're having a trust drafted to your estate planning, you need to work with a qualified attorney. And there isn't a category of special needs planning attorney, how they identify themselves as an elder law attorney, because the laws for people elderly that are on Medicaid are the same for those with disabilities. So you'll see an elder law or estate planning attorney. And a good question to ask is, how many of these trusts do you draft a month? Okay, not a year, but how many do you draft a month? You want to make sure that they really do this as a main course of their practice. Supplemental needs trust is, you hear it bantered around the term as a special needs trust. Technically, that's not true, but in the community, we all kind of use those interchangeable. So here's some questions to ask when talking to an attorney or when planning. What is a guardian, and do I need to obtain guardianship, limited or full, when my child turns 18, or is an alternative to guardianship sufficient? That really depends on your child. So the consultants at UPC can direct you and guide you in all of these areas. In addition, UPC's new guardianship will walk you through the steps as well as the options. So I would recommend that you talk specifically with UPC about that. If there are assets worth more than $2,000 in my name, can my child lose their benefits? Yes, they can. There are some ways to deal with that. They're not ideal. So we always say it's better to do the planning now. How do I prevent my child from becoming ineligible? Planning. And what is a special needs trust compared to a supplemental needs trust? So supplemental needs trust is what most of us want for our kids. It's technically referred to as a third-party discretionary supplemental needs trust. And third party is our money going in there. Special needs trust is referring to a first-party trust. And that is something, if somebody has a big injury, lawsuit settlement, they need to be on Medicaid, but they're getting this money from their lawsuit. How do they remain eligible? The attorney drafts a first party trust, but it has a Medicaid payback provision in it. So supplemental needs trust is what we want. When is it best to create that? I always say it's never too early and it's never too late. What happens if I die and I don't have a trust? Is my child automatically kicked off Medicaid? So in that case, there's these wonderful things called pooled trusts that I referred to earlier that can be used if perhaps a child receives money that is not a great deal, but it's more than $2,000, it's going to kick them off their benefits. You can have that money go into the pooled trust and they can remain eligible. If there's money left in that trust from their portion after they pass away, it remains in the trust for other beneficiaries, or an attorney can draft that first party trust to keep them eligible. Again, a Medicaid payback provision on that. Can't I just leave my money to the siblings? Well, you could, however, and this is what people used to do before these trusts came about. What if you leave it to sister and sister gets divorced and half of that money is now subject to divorce proceedings? What if you leave it to sister and sister gets in a horrible car accident and gets sued? What if you leave it to sister and, you know, God forbid, she becomes disabled and needs to spend that down? So the only way you can really plan on that is to have a trust. What's a trustee and who should be my trustee? Are there other fiduciaries I should consider part of my plan? So a trustee is the person who is in charge of that trust. They're a fiduciary, meaning they have a high level of responsibility there and legal liability. Who should be your trustee? A lot of people want family members, and there's nothing wrong with that. It should be somebody obviously that's responsible, that knows your child, and that familiarizes themselves with public benefits, because making a wrong distribution can jeopardize their benefits. You can also have a corporate trustee, or you can have a corporate trustee and a family member serve together as co-trustees. How often should I update my estate planning documents? I think you should review them every couple of years with your lawyer, and they don't need to be updated every year. If there's a major change, they should be updated. But, you know, I think I have updated mine 3 times in the last 20 years or so. We've got it covered and don't anticipate relying on public assistance programs. Well, think again after you saw some of those numbers, because it adds up to hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million over somebody's lifetime.
And so we have one question on this attorney
Okay.
trying to select an attorney. How many special needs trusts should an attorney draft every month to be quote unquote qualified?
That's a good question. I don't have a hard and fast on that, but if somebody told me, oh, I maybe do 1 or 2, I'd say that's probably not enough. The attorneys that I refer to and work with, you know, they might do 50 plus a year on these things. So it has to be a real part of their practice, and you can check them out, look on their website, see if it really, and get referrals from other references from other people of their clients. You can do a little research online and see what their background is. But you really, I think the biggest way to tell is how many of these do you do? And if it's 1 or 2 a month, I don't think that's enough. Okay. Or how long have you been doing them too? So somebody who's just started their practice, you probably don't want that either. Okay. Okay, what is, I alluded to this already, so I'm not going to spend any more time on this. Somebody who specializes in that. Step 7 in our process is implementing. So once we know what to do, we obviously have to do it. Otherwise, it's just a good idea, right? The family letter and meeting. So after you've gone to all this trouble to get everything set up, what happens if some well-intentioned relative names your child as beneficiary of their group life insurance? Oh, yeah, I know I have a cousin that has a child with autism, and I'm going to be a nice guy and leave my $5,000 life insurance benefit to that child. And they never tell you about it. And then they pass away, and oops, now there's $5,000 that got into your kid's name. So it's very important to communicate. So people don't live in our world of disability. They don't understand all these things. So here's just kind of an example, some things you might say. It might behoove you to have an actual meeting with people if you think that it's a concern. But dear family and friends, we've done our planning. And although we don't expect anything to be left from your estate, we have to tell you why it's so very important. She has a trust established. So if you are going to leave anything to her, it needs to go to that trust, or it can go to us and we will pass it down, because it could cost her hundreds of thousands of dollars in benefits. And then annual review. Things change, don't they? Market performance changes, tax laws change, government benefits and services change, eligibility laws can change, family changes, and our kids change and progress. The hardcore truth really is that we all have an expiration date on our mortality, and we have 3 choices on how to handle that. We can deny it, we can ignore it, or we can plan for it. It's never too late. Never confuse movement with action, said Ernest Hemingway. Movement is sharing thoughts about what we think on social media and what concerns us, and lots of people do that. But action is when we're pushing ourselves to learn something new and then actually doing something about what we just learned. This is a picture of a friend of mine's son, a young man about 35 years old now, who has profound autism, nonverbal, low IQ, and has a phenomenal quality of life. And that is because his mother put together her planning. She wasn't a woman of a lot of resources, but she did her planning, and this young man has a great life because of that. So the journey of 1,000 miles, I like to say, begins with a single step. My information is right there. If I'm happy to serve as a resource. Some of you had questions that were too in-depth for us to take the time to go into in the workshop, but that doesn't mean that they aren't important. And I'm happy to talk with any of you about your individual situations. That is my email and phone number. If you want to send me an email, I'm happy to shoot you a response, and you can schedule a time with my links to schedule something that works for you.
We do have some questions coming in. Tips for finding a corporate trustee that doesn't cost a fortune. I've been looking for a year now. I have no family to serve that role. And then she also said she'll call you, but I think other people will have that question too.
Good question.
I know in Utah, somebody told me America First Credit Union has someone that will do that. I don't know about their rates.
Check them out. So you do want to be careful because it's a money-making machine, trust management, right? Generally speaking, and I don't want to overgeneralize, but they'll charge, 1.5% or more every year, and of the assets there. So, and then on top of that, there's fees, and people have to get paid for managing the money. I mean, for goodness sakes, that's what industry I'm in. but you want to make sure that it's an appropriate fit, because some of those one-off fees can really get exorbitant. And I've seen some banks and institutions that will go unnamed that really hit it to their clients on these trusts with high fees. And supplemental needs trust, special needs trusts, by the way, carry a heavy degree of fiduciary responsibility. And so they're going to charge more for that. There's a lot of liability. So unless your trust has a lot of money in it, they may not even take it on. So that's something that I'm happy to talk individually about. There are a few companies in Colorado, one of which I trust very, very much, that does a good job. But I wouldn't just go to any old bank because they have, a trust department.
So two things before we get to, or one more thing before we get to the additional questions. I've launched the follow-up poll. If you will all just take a minute and fill out those quick questions. It just takes a second. It helps us to learn if you feel like this workshop was beneficial and if you feel like you learned some things. So if you'll just fill that out for us, that would be great. The next question is, you recommended establishing an ABLE account right away. Can you help us understand why sooner is better than later?
Okay, so an ABLE account, again, I'm trying not to give wholesale recommendations because an ABLE account isn't right for everybody. If you're going to set one up, it's better to do sooner rather than later, because you can accumulate money that can grow over time. It can be invested in a variety of mutual funds, depending on the ABLE account, and grow over time. So it's always better to get started sooner than later. Whether an ABLE account is right for you or not, again, depends on a lot of individual circumstances.
Can I give a real life example to kind of paint a picture for them on that? So my son is 21. If you've been to our other classes, you might have already heard this example, but he has been working for Lagoon and McDonald's for about 5 summers. And over those 5 years, he's accumulated about $13,000. So obviously his wage is not enough for him to live on. But as I'm going through and trying to start getting him eligible for SSI, he has $13,000 in his name. So that's more than the $2,000 that he's allowed. So what I will do is open up an ABLE account, and I can deposit that money in his ABLE account because I can put up to $16,000 per year in the account. And I won't be doing that every year. I mean, this is just his 5-year lump sum money. And that money will go into his ABLE account, or I could put it into our special needs trust and help fund the special needs trust. An ABLE account is easier because I can get a stable card, and it acts like a debit card for him, where he can use money from his ABLE account for qualified purchases. So then I just have to monitor his direct deposits to make sure he stays under the 2,000. But as I'm getting him on SSI, I need to get that money out of his name. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Melissa, or if that's a...
It's a perfect example of a good use for an ABLE account. So if you have one set up and your child or adult child is working, it's a great vehicle to use to stick that money so they're not ever in danger of accumulating more than the $2,000 in the name.
Okay. Another question, if no planning has been done, what would be the recommended first step to do?
Depending on the age of your child, there's things that everybody needs to do. I would say it's a depending on your situation.
18 in 2 months.
Okay, so you have to public benefits, and you can't file for them until their 18th birthday, but get them on SSI right away. Then step 2 would be establishing a supplemental needs trust so that they're not in danger of inheriting more than $2,000 and kicking them off those benefits. Public benefits, number 1. Number 2, supplemental needs trust and estate planning. And number 3, perhaps looking at some life insurance to fund the trust depending on your situation.
Perfect. Okay. Is there a list of attorneys in Utah who are experienced in doing special needs trust, or is personal research the best way to figure it out? And I'll let Melissa answer, but also one of the resources we know is the Utah Bar Directory, so that you can look on that and see who specializes in those types of fields. But go ahead, Melissa, if anything else you have to
So
add.
yes, there is the answer to that. And Brady, who heads up our operation in Lehigh, has an attorney who he's very comfortable with, who did his own planning, speaks very well for her. And I'm happy to get that reference for Jenny, who can give it to those who ask.
Okay. Might there be an advantage to establishing the supplemental needs trust now rather than waiting until the will is executed? That way I could ensure that it's working right.
So your estate planning, the will is really the easiest thing that the attorney will draft. The trust is more involved, and usually it's an all-in-one kind of group that they'll deal with the will and the trust and powers of attorney, healthcare directives, and all of that at once for a fee. They're not going to just do a trust without a will. They'll do both.
And also to tag on to that, the Utah Parent Center can walk all of you through how to get guardianship if that's what you're wanting to do, so that you wouldn't have to pay an attorney for that piece. It's a $35 filing fee, and Utah Courts has the paperwork online, and we teach you how to go through the paperwork. We don't fill it out for you. But if you have questions on guardianship, make sure you contact the Utah Parent Center and talk to me. And then there was a question, why set up an ABLE account if SSI covers them?
Say that again. Why set up an ABLE account if SSI covers them? So SSI is $841 a month. And you saw some of those expenses. So the ABLE account is designed to give people another vehicle to do additional savings for things that they are going to need in life. That your additional savings can go to a trust, can go to an ABLE account, but SSI is not going to cover all that they need.
Okay. Does conservatorship affect their SSI eligibility? And I want to make sure that you know the difference. In Utah, conservatorship is typically just used for finances and property. What Utah recognizes as far as handling like education, living, medical, all of the different aspects of your child's life is guardianship. So I want to make sure those words are not used interchangeably. They're very different. But does guardianship affect their SSI eligibility, or does conservatorship affect their SSI eligibility? I would say no. Would you say,
No, I would agree with that.
Okay. What is a reasonable amount to pay for a special needs trust to be created for a family?
That's a loaded question. I have seen them a good quality, and it's not just the trust. Let me just tell you again, they're going to do an attorney. They're not just going to do one-off trust and then you've got this will over here that somebody else did. It's not a big deal for them to draft a will. The trust is the bigger thing. So they're going to do a whole comprehensive package of documents, estate planning documents. So that could range, the whole kit and caboodle could range, on the very low end, maybe $1,500. On the high end, maybe that's $5,000. I know somewhere in the middle is probably where it'll land, but it again depends on your individual situation.
Yes, and then let me go back to see when they asked why set up an ABLE account if SSI covers them. They said in this case it's for a severely disabled child, so that severely disabled child probably will not be working. So if you have a severely disabled child, if they're getting SSI and they're paying their parents' rent,
right,
and the parent takes the money out, maybe if there's excess SSI left, that could go into an ABLE account. Or can you think of another scenario where a severely disabled child who wouldn't be working would need an ABLE account?
You may not. And so having that extra information helps me answer that. So it may not be, a good idea. It probably isn't going to hurt anything, but it may not be the best choice of places to keep funds. If somebody is severely disabled, they're never going to be working and earning income, it may not be something for them. It may be better just to either accumulate the assets in your own name as a parent, and then when you pass away, have those go down via your trust to the child's trust.
Okay. Another question, we are doing a virtual auction for Elevate Theater at the U of U for disabled adults next month, and we'll be auctioning off guardianship and special needs trust done by the wonderful Lisa Thornton. And she is fabulous. Lisa knows what she's doing. It's a great way to get it done for less than you will typically pay. Last year it went for about $500 and Sarah bought it. And we've also had special needs trusts auctioned off in our auctions as well. So that is a great tip. And if you don't know Lisa Thornton, she has a daughter who has Prader-Willi, and she is an attorney and does this all the time. So that would be a great thing to bid on. So Sarah, you'll have to email me the link to that auction and I'll have to spread it around the office. It's a great tip. What other questions do we have? And you're welcome to unmute yourself if you'd rather just ask your question instead of type it, if that's easier. And I will be sending this recording out to everyone who registered, even those who didn't attend tonight, so that you can watch this again and share it with maybe a spouse or another family member if you want to spread the information so it's not all on your shoulders.
So, hi, I'm Christine Humphrey. I was the one who asked the question about would there be an advantage to actually creating the supplemental needs trust before I die, so that I can. And the reason I'm asking that question is, so we do have a will set up, and there is a supplemental needs trust that will be set up when our will is executed. But lately I've been thinking that I'm kind of a control freak. So I'm thinking I'd like to maybe get the supplemental needs trust set up and maybe partially funded, so that I can work with my grandchild's father, who is my son, who's not really good at paperwork. So that he sees what needs to be done. And so we have a chance to practice, a little bit before I head on off to whatever's next.
So your question then is, should you set up your supplemental needs trust to have it live today?
Now.
Or should you wait and have one that comes into being after you pass?
Right.
Okay. So again, I hate to keep saying this, but it does depend. It's individual. So it's your grandchild is the one that has the disability. Is that correct?
Yes, and he's profoundly deaf, and he is on the autism spectrum, and he is 14 years old now, and he will never be able to live on his own.
Right. Okay, so you could do that. Either way is going to work. If you want to have it that springs into being when you pass away, that will work. Or you can establish one now. It will probably cost you more with the attorney to have one established now than one that comes into being later. And you can gift funds into that. Is your adult son, the father of your grandchild, is he going to be the trustee?
Yes. Okay.
So I don't think that's a bad idea, actually, to have him start understanding some of this, because it's a lot to bite off, right? Yeah. And understanding what an eligible expense is, and maybe getting a little bit of education around that by the attorney, and what he has to do to, where the public benefits are going to come in and what he can't pay for out of the trust. And if that helps him learn it, if he's going to be the trustee and you think, you're his mother, so then that's not a bad idea.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. This
Sure.
has been one of the best that Utah Parent Center has put on, and they've all been good, but this has been one of the best.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks, Melissa. We have a few more questions. Let me find my place in the slides, and I put it in the chat, but I'm going to be sending this recording to everyone, and I'll send the slide notes again, not Melissa's notes, but the pictures of the slides. Are ABLE accounts the same in every state?
No, they are not. They have some of the same general limitations. For instance, you can only have one, only 16,000 a year can go in for contributions. But the maximum that you can have in an account varies per state. But those maximums are really high. We're talking about 500,000, anywhere from 100,000 plus to 500,000 plus maximum can be in these accounts. And some of them have different features. Some of them have a debit card, some of them don't. So they all have the same basic rules of who can qualify for one, how much can go in, and what eligible expenses are, but there are a lot of different features.
And just so you all know, for Utah, watch that you don't go over the 100,000 because they lose their SSI, but our cap for Utah as of this month is 517,000. So you can have up to that amount, but the 100,000 is kind of that sweet spot for not losing SSI. Wendy asked, how much are people charging their children for rent? Is there a cap?
So, if they're only getting $840 a month in SSI, and it's technically not rent, it's room and board. So I have clients that are, we're in a major metro area like Salt Lake. You could charge them $700 a month easily. I mean, if they're living in your household and they have free room and board, you could go pretty high on that.
And if you have questions about how to track your SSI money, please give us a call at the Utah Parent Center and ask to speak with our Utah Family Voices project. They are pros at SSI and they can help you with that. And somebody asked for Lisa Thornton's contact information, and Sarah put that in the chat if you want to grab that out of the chat before we end. Janelle asked, are the ABLE accounts set up through our bank, or are there specific institutions that the ABLE accounts are through?
So it's not necessarily a bank. They're separate institutions and they're different in every state. You can go online and Google Utah ABLE account, which is stable account, I believe, and that will take you through a process where you can set them up online.
And just so you all know, again, if you've been in our other classes, you already know about these resources that are coming. But in the next week or so, I'm going to be releasing out the teen workbook that we've been working on that has all of these resources in it. And then the next book to follow, hopefully in about a month, is the choices booklet. So watch your emails and the Parent Center newsletter for links to those booklets. But we'll have all of the links for the ABLE accounts. We'll have all the links for SSI, for Medicaid, and for all of these resources that we're talking about tonight, and kind of defining everything for you so you don't have to try to keep all of this in your brain. Another question, isn't a supplemental needs trust part of setting up a revocable living trust for the parents, or is it independently set up? Also, if it is set up now, doesn't it need its own tax ID and filing separately?
So you can have that either way. A lot of the parents, families that I work with, it makes more sense for them to have their own family revocable living trust. And then when they pass away, within that trust, if they have more than one kid, it'll split between the kids, and the kid with disabilities share goes in a supplemental needs trust. Or you can have one that lives today, and it really is an individual situation and circumstances. Sometimes I recommend they be set up today. For instance, if there are divorced parents or grandparents want to gift into a trust specifically. And then your question about, does it need a separate tax ID if it is set up today? Trying to remember on that. If it is a irrevocable trust, I believe it does need its separate tax ID today. If it is a grantor trust, I'm not sure. I have to say I'm going to defer to an attorney on that one.
Okay. And then Sarah had a tip for everyone. For room and board, you need to charge a certain amount so that you don't get SSI reduced. If there are 3 of you at home, you need to charge a third of the rent or mortgage. Not sure of the amount if you own the home. There is information online. And again, call the Utah Parent Center and ask for Utah Family Voices if you want to talk about specifics. But that's a great tip. Thanks, Sarah. Any other questions? I saw some hands raised before, but with the way that my screen is, I can't see your faces or your hands. Are there any other questions? Is it all as clear as mud and you're just confused?
I apologize if this is a lot of information and if it seems overwhelming. That's probably a normal feeling because this is a big body of work. That's why there's professionals like me that actually have a designation in it and spend all of our days working on it. So don't feel that you're in any way inept or can't understand it. It's a lot. It's a lot. And that's why there's organizations like Utah Parent Center that can help you walk through some of this stuff.
And the purpose of this too is to not make you feel overwhelmed, but we just want to introduce you to all of the information, and then you can go through it at your own pace and figure out what is the next step. Just like the one mom asked, what's the first thing that we need to do? And I know that all of us are in different socioeconomic situations. We all have different incomes, different amounts of children. Some of our children are higher functioning than others. Some children are going to need more intense care. And so just realize that we're here for you and that everybody can do something to help prepare, even if it's just going on the Utah Medical Home portal and clicking on that notebook, the care notebook template. And that's one thing you can do that's free. And you can go through and start to put that letter of intent together. So just don't feel overwhelmed. Just know that there's one thing that you can do. And then next week, there's another thing you can do. And you can make it happen. We had another question. If you own the home, you would divide the property tax by a third, is what Jennifer said.
Is that a question? Or
no, that's just a statement on
Okay.
the question about rent
Okay.
for SSI. So, and I don't know these things yet because we're still working on our SSI. We're still getting it set up. So again, call the Utah Family Voices so that you can make sure you're doing what you need to do for your family. And Anderson says the board includes food too. Again, for the rent. Any other questions? And thank you again for filling out the poll. I'll send you all of the recording and the slides. And if we get more questions and we feel like we can add on to this, or if you want to message me, I emailed all of you the slides today. If there's things you feel like we didn't cover, or if there's aspects of the workshop that you feel like we need to beef up and go into greater detail, I would love your personal feedback and helping us understand how we can make this even better.
Again, thank you, Jenny, for allowing us to come into your homes via Zoom tonight and share this information. I hope that it was valuable to you. And as I said, we're happy to serve as a resource and help in any way we can.
Okay, and if you didn't receive the slides, I'll send them out again tomorrow. So just watch for those. We're getting a couple of those questions. All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us, and a huge thank you to Melissa and also to Brady and Melissa and Brady's team that helped with these slides. Also, Utah Family Voices helped with some of the content on these slides, and so we're really grateful for them as well and the hours that went into this, the preparation for this meeting. So thank you so much. And I will be in touch with the slides and the recording, and reach out if you have any questions about guardianship or SSI or any of the things we talked about tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.